It is October 29th, 2021. This is the Daily Rob, and if you're watching, you gotta like, you gotta subscribe, and you gotta leave us some nice comments. And if you hate looking at us, we are also available on all major podcast platforms. So on that note, drum roll for the one, the only, the legendary Rob Smith.
Ivanka, I've got to go now. I got to do a podcast. But look, you got to quit calling me like this, okay? You're a married woman. I know you got a thing for me, but you got to quit. Just quit it, okay? Okay. Goodbye. I'm sorry, Stu. Are we on?
Oh, we are on, and we are live.
God, I'm sorry. That was embarrassing. So, Stu, what's going on today, son?
Sounds like Jared's heart is going to be broken, but outside of that, it's been a fairly chill day.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you box today?
I did not box today. I did some cardio and read a book. So a light day for me.
What book did you read?
I'm reading Shambhala by Trungpa. Which
those don't sound very American-like, Stu.
They're Tibetan, but interesting. There are actually a lot of similarities between Trungpa's thoughts and C.S. Lewis, and I would go so far as to say that Canadian professor that sounds like Kermit the Frog.
Really?
Yes, sir.
Of all three, if you put all three of them in a room, who would win an arm wrestling contest? C.S. Lewis, Trungpa, or the Canadian guy?
I think it comes down to. I think that's a real toughie because Trungpa was stocky as he can be. I think it comes down to JBP and Trungpa.
Okay.
Scrappy
CS is out, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a little bit of a girly. Did you ever read Surprised by Joy?
I have not. The one I've wanted to read by Lewis that's kind of tough to find is he retells a classical Greek story. I think it's Till We All Have Faces, I believe is the name of it.
Yes.
So that's hard to find, believe it or not.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Surprised by Joy, the last chapter's good. I get the Christian message. It resonated with me, but getting there, oh my God, he was kind of a whiny kid growing up. I didn't really identify with him much. But anyway, I love all of his books, and he's actually taught me a few things too, which is hard to do.
He is a great philosopher, I gotta admit.
Yeah. All right, Stu, we're going to talk about the news now?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, Andrew Cuomo has been charged with a misdemeanor merely for being Italian. You know, Italians gesticulate with their hands, and every now and then those hands find their ways to a woman's buttocks or their bosoms. He can't help it. It's a Mediterranean thing. It's racist what they're doing to him.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Oh, Eddie, baby, someday when COVID's not a thing, if we're on Earth for what it's worth, I hope they make you king.
That one didn't age quite so well.
And now back to your regularly scheduled program.
Well, don't you agree, Stu? It's racist.
You know,
It's their culture.
When I think about the Godfather movies, Sonny certainly had a hard time keeping his hands to himself. And what was it? Connie's.
Is that when he nailed the woman against the door?
I believe so, yes.
You know, I was 9 years old when I saw that at the drive-in with Billy King. My parents were conservative, but socially, you know, it was a free-for-all. They, you know, all boys, they didn't care. But Mrs. King was upset that mother let us see that movie.
No more. Not this time, consigliere. No more meetings, No more discussions, no more Salazzo tricks. You give him one message, I want Salazzo. Now that's all out war, we go to the
Some
match.
of the other families won't sit still.
Then they hand me Salazzo.
Your father would want to hear this. This is business, not personal.
They shot my father, that's
Even the
business or
shooting of your
ass.
father was business, not personal, Sonny.
Well, then business will have to suffer, all right? Hey, listen, do me a favor, Tom. No more advice on how to patch things up. Just help me win, please, all right?
Anyway, another story, Stu, is the Biden administration wants to pay illegal aliens $450,000 apiece for the trauma they had breaking into our country and being separated from their children. The reason that they were separated from their children, Stu, is because in many instances, they weren't their children. They were coyotes being paid to take the children into America, and children being abused, and taking them away from their fake parents actually saved their lives. In other situations, the parents were criminals. And I'm sorry, Stu, but if you're in America, if I got 5 children and I go out and shoot somebody, guess what? They separate me from my children. But you know, the Biden administration wants to give money away, and so that's what they're doing. It's insane. The economy, Stu, it apparently grew, gross domestic product grew at 2%, which is pretty low. But you know, what a lot of people don't understand when the talking vacuous heads throw out numbers, they don't know what they're referring to. Well, this is 2% over the third quarter of last year. Think how bad things were last year. Yeah. So it's, in ordinary times, it's not a good number, but it is a really drastically low number now. And it's obviously a result of everything we see with high inflation, supply line problems, the uncertainty among the investor class with Congress talking about all these regulations and taxes. All it does is drive investment down, and all growth, Stu, comes from the supply side. Wow, capital. There would be no growth without capital. And when you penalize capital, you won't have any growth. They ought to make me Secretary of the Treasury, Fed Chairman, and Commerce Secretary all in one, Stu. We would have.
Maybe we could just shorten that title to the Monopoly Man and just get you a top hat and just
a little cave. Yeah. I like that. Stu, the next topic has to do with enthusiasm for election and what might be as an indicator to voter fraud. We saw in the 2020 election, Trump would have, 60, 70,000 folks, people lined up in parking lots for miles. And Joe Biden would go to an event and have 6 people. Well, we have a similar thing going on in Virginia now. Terry McAuliffe had a rally with Joe Biden in Arlington, which is about as blue as you can get, in a huge metropolitan area, right practically on the Potomac. You would think there'd be 10,000 screaming soy drinking latte boys there, but there weren't. There were like 200 people. The other night in Richmond, I was at an oyster roast, but I had some friends go to see Glenn Youngkin at Tom Leonard Supermarket, and there were thousands of people there. So we will see. But I definitely think that's a harbinger of Youngkin having, enthusiasm, but probably having the popular vote as well. We'll see if they cheat again.
And I have a little bit of scoop from just the circles I roll in. So,
which I must say, Stu, are some pretty lofty circles.
Okay. But on the libertarian side of things, it seems that most of, I guess, the right-leaning libertarians are going to not just fill something in. They realize how tight it is, and they are willing to give their vote to Youngkin because he's good on at least a few things very solidly. So that I think that says a lot, that they're willing to forgo their principles and vote for this fella.
Good. Well, McAwful wouldn't have won the first time, but for the fact that the Democrats planted a libertarian in the race. I think they did that with Northern too. So anyway, next, this is a very important topic, and it's a sensitive topic as well. PETA, the animal rights group, is enraged because in baseball, the pitchers practice in the bullpen. It's offensive to bulls, Stu. We cannot offend bulls. Talking about bull, that's real bull. Anyway, just, Stu, the richer we are and the more leisure time we have, the more wackos have time to be absolutely out of their mind. And I think this is an example of that. Jesus, get a life. Have you ever noticed that the PETA people, especially the women, are not very attractive still?
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I can't comment on that.
You're such a poet, Steve.
Yeah.
You're much less superficial than I am. Well, I kind of wear my superficiality as a badge of honor, Steve. Okay, Florida has the lowest corona case rate in the country. Why? They've been the most liberal with their policies towards, lockdowns and oppressive measures, but they have been actively encouraging prophylactics. Hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, and monoclonal antibodies. And I think that's why. I do think sometimes when we compare state to state with all the interstate travel and the mixing and all that, it's meaningful, but you have to understand that, the virus is still going to spread because people are traveling all over the place anyway. But I do think that just proves this whole idea that you have to be vaccinated when there are prophylactics that have proven to work at pretty much no expense. It kind of proves the point. So Stu, that's about all I got.
Right on. So I want to clear up some fake news that I promoted yesterday.
Ooh, Stu, correction.
Yeah. So I was back at Lidl today, and I decided to ask one of the staff members what's going on with the shelves. Is this a supply chain thing? And just asking that was just like, it's like, what do you mean by supply chains? And so I said, well, half the store is empty. What's going on? So it turns out that they had a massive power failure with their freezer sections. And that's why everything was empty. But they have no staff. So this one guy, who was a very nice guy from Sweden, awesome accent, very nice. He was telling me how he was the only one there stocking things, and that because all of the call outs and the lack of staff that they have. So
did he explain why there is a lack of staff?
I got him to open up a little bit, and then I left him on a happy, positive note. So maybe next time I see him, he'll spill more beans. But you should have seen how he reacted to me even asking about supply chains. I mean, It was something else.
Huh.
We have 15 pallets. We have 15 pallets.
Did you ask him why the Vikings left Newfoundland in 1060 AD?
I should have.
Yeah, okay. Good work, Stu. Investigative reporting.
But yeah, so I was fake news yesterday.
You are fake news.
Today, I
Well,
am
Stu, that's what he says. Okay.
true.
He
True.
says it was in, but how many of the dry goods? You showed shelves that were empty, and it could have just, and those are all dry goods. So
Well, that was their semi-cold section, like where you would get like cheese and cold cuts.
okay.
So, but I mean, it's
So
still
meatballs, right?
well, yeah. So,
You got to have Swedish meatballs at Lidl.
yeah.
I thought it was German. Is it Swedish?
It's German. So I'm looking at this Julian Assange story that's going on right now.
Ooh.
So the UK court system had said no to the desire for the US to extradite him to America, where he will be tried under the Espionage Act of 1917.
Does that call for capital punishment by any chance?
No, it does not. Treason typically does, but we haven't had a treason case here in the United States since about 19.
Since Joe Biden gave away Afghanistan? Oh, he hadn't been charged yet. Excuse me.
Yeah. But since the 50s. And that was
The Rosenbergs.
Now, this is actually a Japanese gentleman who had born in Calexico, California, was living in Japan for university at the start of the Second World War, had been living in Japan throughout the war, and apparently when he eventually came back to America in the 50s, he was accused by a former prisoner of war as having abused people. And so the guy who recognized him contacted the FBI, and there was a court case on it. Really kind of interesting thing. And so
Kind of like a Nuremberg thing, it sounds like.
yeah, it gets kind of weird, and people kind of had mixed feelings where you have this guy of Japanese, his family was Japanese, had gone back to Japan, didn't serve with the Japanese military.
Yeah, why didn't the Japanese prosecute?
It's because I guess he's technically American born.
Okay, all right.
So Eisenhower decided that he didn't deserve the death sentence, and then Kennedy says, "Hey, you know what? You could just go to Japan. Why are you here? Like, we'll release you, but you have to immediately go to Japan." And so that's what happened with that. But when we look back at Obama era treatment of whistleblowers, things get a little shaky. So the fact that the US is appealing this decision of the UK court and insisting that Assange gets brought to the United States is something I'm keeping an eye on. So the US says we won't hold Assange in a super max prison. That's the big thing, where he's been in solitary confinement for so long that he's arguably not even mentally sane anymore. And so Assange's lawyers, Assange's friends and family, they're pushing hard for him to stay in the UK, even if it's not ideal because of just how nasty his treatment has been over time. So my issue is that
Is he stuck having to eat English food?
Yeah, by definition,
Like Stilton cheese and fish and chips and
spotted dick.
ugh. Yeah, I could see where that'd be pretty bad. But anyway, being killed in America would be worse for him.
Yes. And so a few weeks back, I had covered the Yahoo News article on how the CIA had a plan to assassinate Assange, and they had gone through all this kind of mumbo jumbo of reclassifying him as essentially a non-state agent so they could whack him. So you already have a government that has had a plan to kill the guy, but they want him to come back so they can have a fair case.
Yeah, due process. We'll duly kill your ass. That's what they mean by due process.
Yeah.
Still, you know why they want to kill him? I do.
Tell me.
He's got the dibs on him. It's amazing he hasn't released anything yet, but you know, they want to find out where the dibs are, and they're probably going to torture him and say, okay, give us all of your thumb drives and where all this information is so we can destroy it. You know, that's what's going on.
I think that's a side of it, but I also think they want to make an example out of him as well. So, yeah.
Kind of like the Germans in East Germany, in Hungary and in Austria, when somebody got out of whack and, you know, maybe maybe weren't good occupants. They said, okay, well, if you're going to do this, we're going to line up 20 of y'all and shoot you, which they did a lot of in Eastern Europe to keep people in line.
Yeah. And so I am kind of reminded of the treatment of whistleblowers under the Obama administration. And so you had people like Thomas Andrews Drakes, Chelsea Manning, John Carrican, and these are people who were true blue believers of what I would call Democratic Party ideals. And yet when they were confronted with the reality of the situation, they decided to whistleblow in some capacity. And when we look at some of these court cases, when they leak to the press, when they leak to certain people, then you have kind of a established under the law notion that just because these news reporters are holding classified materials, you have reporters being treated like spies opposed to being treated like journalists. And that gets us into a very kind of scary area if we're actually going to try to
hold the government accountable.
Yeah, so government accountability goes down the drain, and then using this Espionage Act of 1917, so over 100 years old, is a very blunt tool for essentially prosecuting leakers and whistleblowers.
So it kind of reminds me of what they did to Whittaker Chambers. If you're familiar, Whittaker Chambers was a fellow traveler. He was a communist. He was a party man. And during the 30s and 40s, there were lots of communists in the State Department, Alger Hiss being one of them. And Whittaker Chambers got disillusioned with their democratic ideals, communism, and he ratted them out. And they hated him. They did everything they could to destroy him because he bucked the party line. And that's one thing about, they say, when you join the party, it's just like joining the mafia. You ain't never getting out of it. They won't let you. But he did. He wrote a book called Witness, and he was a real hero to the Bill Buckley types for a long, long time. People who knew his story and knew him. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, Assange was a golden boy of the news media when he was shitting on the Bush administration. But the moment he has a backbone and continues to just speak the truth on what he sees that's wrong in the world, you know, he becomes public enemy number one. Now they want to make an example out of him, kill him, you know, all that good stuff.
You know, the thing, who knows what he has, but he has a lot. I think he's got Hillary's 30,000 emails, but I'll never forget reading some of the emails that were leaked out during the 2020 campaign with Podesta and his brother. And they were to go to a Manhattan apartment of a lady named Abrahoff, who was a big Democrat and a witch. And they were going to eat a meal that she prepared that had blood in it. Ooh, some sick stuff.
Yeah.
And who knows what kind of stuff he could reveal like that. Pretty satanic, if you ask me.
You know, I
Stu,
think-
whenever I go to the supermarket and I look at a can of soup or something, I always make sure it doesn't have any human blood in it. Call me crazy.
there you go. And that and sodium, 2 things to avoid.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, so keeping an eye on that, it just seems very dirty that after all this time, the guy is a complete shell of what he used to be, but they still want to punish him.
Oh, yeah.
So what are the words of wisdom?
These are some quotes from one of my favorite Americans, Virginia Bourne. He was a man who understood human nature. He understood that we had to protect ourselves from ourselves. He was a master in organizing various branches of government to be checks and balances against each other. He was one of the authors of the Federalist Papers. He was a short little guy, and he went to Princeton. And I will read some of his more famous sayings. This being the most famous, I think. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. Liberty may be endangered by the abuse of liberty, but also the abuse of power. We are right to take alarm at the first experiment upon our liberties. That's right, folks. We should be alarmed right now. Equal laws protecting equal rights, the best guarantee of loyalty and love of country. No nation could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. All men having power ought to be distrusted to a certain degree. The advancement and diffusion of knowledge is the only guardian of true liberty. And that's what we're doing here, Stu. We are advancing and diffusing knowledge. The truth is that all men having power ought to be mistrusted. Ambition must be made to counteract ambition. Checks and balances. What is government itself but the greatest of all reflections of human nature? James Madison, my man.
Damn, those are good.
Thank you, Stu. You know, he was quite the Renaissance man, just like Mr. Jefferson was, but he doesn't get credit for a lot of his natural science and philosophy experiments and studies and pamphlets. If you ever go to Mount Pelier, you'll see it's kind of like a Monticello with his library and all of his experiments. Truly the age of enlightenment, Stu.
Now, and that's up near Fredericksburg, right?
It's Orange County,
Okay.
Madison County. Yeah, it's over to the left a little bit.
Yeah, I've been curious to go for sure.
Yeah, it's well worth the trip.
Right on. Well, on that note, thank you so much. And
Happy weekend, Stu.
have a
Want
wonderful.
to hear all your fans want to hear about your love life on Monday morning, so take notes.
Okay, we'll see. I'll think about it.
Okay,
Right on.
all right. Bye.
Later.
That's a terrific story. And we have newspaper people on the payroll, don't we, Tom? They might like a story like that.
They might. They just might.
It's not personal, Sonny. It's strictly business.